Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Water Center at Penn's Water Exchange Speaker Series. I'm Howard Neukrug. I'm the director of the Water Center at Penn, and we're delighted today to have Mike Webster, who's the executive director of the Cape Town, South Africa's water and waste utility. Today, Mike's going to speak to us about the future of Cape Town water. And before we start, just warning is that we are recording this event and it will be available on our website and our social media starting tomorrow. For those of you who may not be familiar with the Water Center, we are an applied research center focused on identifying innovative and integrated solutions to our urban water challenges, both here in the US and around the world. We offer a series of programs and publications and welcome you to collaborate with us to explore the science, politics, and equity of urban water systems. Please reach out to us via our website, through social media, or just send us an email. Moving on to today's program, we will, of course, first start with Mike's presentation, but following that, we'll have the remainder of the program will be devoted to a question and answer session. And we want to hear your questions, so please send them to us and send them via the Q&A icon on your screen. We will get to as many as we can. So let me first begin by introducing Mike. Mike Webster is the Executive Director of the Water and Waste Directorate in the city of Cape Town, South Africa. In this position, he is accountable for Cape Town's full water cycle, from source to tap, then back to the drain to the environment. His utility serves 4 million people in Cape Town through 660,000 connections and 20,000 kilometers of pipe. For those of you not familiar with kilometers, that's over 12,000 miles of pipeline. Before joining the city of Cape Town in 2018, Mike worked for 16 years at the World Bank in Washington, DC, and was a water and sanitation investment specialist. His experience at the World Bank exposed him to the water systems in over 20 countries in South Asia, Eastern Europe, and Africa. He led investment operations in water supply, sanitation, solid waste management, municipal services, rural infrastructure, and environmental protection. You can see why I'm so excited that we have Mike here to talk to us, and he has a wealth of global experience, and he has a big challenge ahead of him dealing with the water supply to the city of Cape Town. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mike for his presentation on the future of water for the city of Cape Town. Mike.
Thanks a lot, Howard, and greetings to everyone. I'm here sitting in Cape Town, South Africa, the southern tip of Africa for those who haven't been here. I think there are a couple of Cape Townians on the call, but quite a few of you in North America. It's quite far away. It's summer and it's in the evening, 7 o'clock. It's actually, the site that you see on the screen is pretty similar to what I see from my office right here. It's a beautiful city. That's the iconic Table Mountain. And that's the central business district that you can see there. I've been asked to make a presentation on the future of Cape Town water, which is largely in terms of the response that we've had to day zero, to the city almost running out of water a couple of years ago. That hit the news internationally and was a major crisis here. And so I'm going to talk for about 20 to 25 minutes. I've got quite a few slides. I've got about 40, but I think many of them are graphics and I can rush through them. I think the Water Center at Penn will make them available. So if you're not able to see in detail, you can look at them in your own time. So yeah, thanks. That's the first slide. It's a busy slide. Essentially, it describes our particular utility, which is a municipal department of the city of Cape Town municipality. We're a big department. We have 4,800 staff in 12 branches, 63 depots. In US equivalents, our operating budget is about $420 million per year, and our capital budget is about $180 million US. We have a water supply, which comes from a system of dams and treatment plants and reservoirs, with a peak production of about 1,400 million liters per day. I'm afraid I'm not that conversant with what that is in imperial metrics, but in million liters per day, that's what it is. A sanitation, waterborne sanitation system of sewers and 23 wastewater treatment plants and a number of pump stations. We also manage stormwater drainage, an asset value of about $4.5 billion US. So our supply is essentially to the formal areas, 3.5 million people or so through 620,000 connections. That's a full waterborne and 24/7 full pressure supply, as well as informal settlements. And around about 500,000 people live in informal settlements and receive communal standpipe supply, one household, 25 households to one tap, and 5 households to one toilet. And then the businesses, industries, and institution, a further 45,000 connections. You can see our website at the bottom there, and that has all the stats of the utility. Next slide, please. So the key theme that I want to talk about is how the city is building resilience to respond to a number of shocks that we've had over the past few years. The first I mentioned already, the 2018 drought. This hit the news, and the infamous potential day zero, where the city would run out of water. And that was due to a drought which lasted 5 years and challenged the system, just go back please, thanks, to responding to climate change and to system resilience. The year before last, 2019, we had a water quality shock, and that's a headline from a local newspaper about a particular quality event that happened in the tourist area in the sea. And the third shock was COVID, obviously the international pandemic that's hitting all of us, I'm sure in Pennsylvania and around the world, and that's really challenged our public health impact on our economy and our informal settlements in particular. Next slide, please. So coming to the first shock, this is all about an over-reliance on surface water. We get most of our water from a regional scheme, which is managed jointly by the national government and the local government. And about 98% of our water in total comes from surface water. Very little comes from groundwater and other sources. Next slide. This is a graph of rainfall over the last 90 years. The black line in the middle is the annual average inflow into our dams. And so we've had droughts before. You can see in the early 1920s and 30s and then 70s, and more recently in the early 2000s. But the drought between 2014 and 2018 was a 1 in 590 year event. Next slide. If you look at our demand over the last 50 years, we had a pretty steady demand. This is the amount that we produce in a million liters per day. From the 70s to the 2000s, a very steady growth, about 4% per year, based on increasing population, increasing usage. And then after that 2000 drought, which I showed on the previous slide, we had to flatten that to a 1% growth due to a lot of physical measures, a lot of water demand management, traditional utility type water demand management. And then with the big drought in the 2014 to 2018 period, we had to dramatically bring this demand right down from around 1,000 million liters per day to around 500 million liters per day. Next slide. This is if you look at it on a per capita basis, and this is a gross per capita water usage. On the left, the small graph is from 1990 to today, and you could see we used to average around about 300 liters per capita per day, similar to other metros around the country. That from 15 years ago went down to about 220 liters per capita per day. With that water demand management measures that were put in place. And then over this period of the drought, that had to be driven right down to a low of around 100 liters per capita per day gross, which in net terms was about 50 liters per household per day. Next slide. How did we do that? We used physical demand measures, aggressive pressure management, water management devices that shut off after a certain amount of water was used per day. Economic incentives, essentially tariffs. Our tariffs were way higher. They were the highest in the world, particularly at the very high consumption levels, over 30 kiloliters per day. And communications, media campaign, getting people on board. And it really was an all of city undertaking. People took the taps out of their baths, showered every second day, hotels got on board, and we got the certificate from the International Water Association for the city that has reduced demand more than other in the world by 55% between 2015 and 2017 without resorting to intermittent supply. And we are taking that claim as part of our branding as the #1 water-saving city in the world. Next slide. So fortunately, our dams have refilled. This is the Wemmershoek Dam in 2017 and the Wemmershoek Dam today. Next slide. But in the last year, that same reduction has happened again over COVID. In the initial lockdown that South Africa went into in March last year, within a week, our demand dropped by a further 10% as our industrial demand went right down, which is having a financial impact. And I'm putting that there because it speaks to a later slide about some of the financial sustainability of relying on volumetric pricing. Next slide. But essentially, this is the takeaway. Our dams only offer us 2 years of security. So if we look at the last 20 years dam inflows, we can see that's 100% of the top, going down to just over 20% as it was approaching day zero. From that 2000 drought, we reduced from 100% to about 25% in 2 years. That took a little bit long in the 2014 to 2018 drought, but essentially, if our rainfall goes down and our dam inflows goes down, we can't build ourselves out of a drought. We can't build a desal plant or a reuse plant in that time to avert a crisis. Next slide. And this is probably the most sobering slide that I'll show you. This is a comparison between Cape Town and Perth in Australia. They are very close in latitude. I think they're 2 degrees north of us. But more importantly, we share the same rainfall patterns. We both get rain when cold fronts from the south and the west reach land. And when those cold fronts are pushed away, we don't get rainfall. So if you look at that little graph there, it's not that easy to see, but perhaps you can see it afterwards for yourself. That is the last 100 years of dam inflows into Perth dams. They have reduced by 85% since the 70s. In that blue block was the average annual inflow into the dam. It went down, stepped down to that green block and down again to that purple block, and that last block, about 15% of the total. If that should happen to Cape Town, we would be in dire straits, and our climate scientists are not able to tell us exactly what our likely rainfall in the future is. Their best guess is between 20 to 30% in the next 20 years, but it could be a lot worse, and we could be on a Perth path. Next slide. Second shock, water quality. So this is due to pollution in the catchments. It's due to increased urbanization. It's due to wastewater treatment works, underperformance, sewer spills, and the like. Essentially, this got to proportions where communities said, as this headline depicts in a not a very polite way, that this is unacceptable, and we are going to take the municipality to task, and we're going to demand a higher level of river water quality. Cape Town is a tourist city, as I showed you. Beach tourism is a big part of it. People use the riverways. We have 21 river catchments for canoeing, for swimming. There are all sorts of economic activities in our rivers, and this level of pollution just wasn't acceptable to our customers. Next slide. Citizens were justified in feeling angry about our water supply. This is a photo of a canal in a high density area, not a pretty sight, but unfortunately not uncommon. In our monitoring system, that slide at the bottom is an annual January to December a level of E. coli in our river systems based on 100 monitoring points. On average, about 40% of our E. coli were over 4,000 E. coli per 100 milliliters. Over 1,000, you can't swim. Between 1,000 and 4,000, you can paddle, but over 4,000 is really unsafe. Next slide. And then the third shock. A year ago, as with around the world, February, March, COVID hit Cape Town and gave us a third crisis to deal with. This is a map of the city based on the vulnerability to climate, to COVID. It's based on a particular index of density, of level of access to water and sanitation services, of access to clinics. And there's a high correlation between COVID vulnerability and informal settlements and poverty and poor access to water and sanitation. Next slide. These are the 500 informal settlements across the city. They are scattered around all over. We provide essential services to these informal settlements, not household supply, but one communal tap to every 25 households and one communal toilet to every 5 households. Next slide. From a customer perspective, from people living in these areas, there's a high level of dissatisfaction within these communities. That image of the right, you can see Table Mountain in the distance, and this is the shack with chemical toilets lined up on the outside. The experience of people living in those communities is that those toilets are shared between many families. They often are dirty, they often are unsafe, particularly at night and particularly for girls and women. For water, the taps are often unreliable. Pressure is not good enough, and so they may not actually provide water 24/7, exacerbated by illegal connections within those communities. The flows are often low or not enough, and taps are often far away from households with quite a bit of time to collect water. Next slide. So this has been our strategy. Never let a good crisis go to waste. How do we take these 3 shocks and build resilience in our system and be stronger for it? From the day 0 shock, the key was to build diversified sources, to move away from an over-reliance on rainwater, to have other sources of water supply, but also to build regional resistance within the regional water supply system. From water quality, we're accelerating our water quality agenda, massive wastewater treatment works, upgrades, sewer spills, but also a focus on customers. How do we actually engage with our customers more, to be responsive to them, to learn what it is that they want from us and are willing to pay for? And thirdly, on COVID, how do we use this crisis to increase the political support, to focus on informal settlements? We rely on grants for the informal settlement work because our tariffs aren't sufficient, but also how do we build financial sustainability in all of our systems to support this going forward? Next slide, please. So this is the strategy that we've produced. It came out early on in the year. I'd encourage you to go to the link on the top right, Cape Town Water, Think Water, and take a look at it. This is the cover. Particularly polluted water body that is an iconic water body in the city that we want to turn around. And we're calling it our shared water future because we do see it as an all of city issue. It's not just something the water department can do. It's something we need every city, business, and civic structure to be a part of. Next slide. The vision is a transition to a water-sensitive city by 2040. And we say that Cape Town will be a water-sensitive city that optimizes and integrates the management of water resources to improve resilience, competitiveness, and livability for all of its people. So it's really about moving out of this particular reliance on surface water and this particular exclusion of certain parts of the community to have a more integrated water-sensitive city over the next while. Next slide. It's driven by 5 commitments that we've made to our citizens and to our political masters. The first is safe access to water and sanitation for all, and this really speaks to the informal settlement, particularly the sanitation agenda, which needs a massive investment and community building. The second, third, and fourth are all speaking directly to the drought. Water-wise use, keeping our per capita usage to about 130 liters per capita per day, but also ensuring that we're efficient in our networks, our non-revenue water, our sewer spills, and the like. The third is sufficient, reliable water from diverse sources. And there we've got a very specific target of 300 megaliters a day from groundwater, desalinated water, and reused water by 2030. We have the financing for that, and we are pursuing that, and that is a flagship of our work. We will, by the end of this, have the biggest wastewater reuse, direct potable reuse scheme in the world, 70 megaliters a day, expandable to 100 megaliters a day. The fourth is on the regional system, working with the national and the provincial governments and the other people who draw from that system, which are the farmers and the environment and the local municipalities, to improve our allocations, to improve the catchments, reducing illegal alien vegetation in the catchments. And then last is this transition to a water-sensitive city, which is all about water quality, long-term sustainability, sewage, wastewater treatment, etc. Next slide. So we realize that this is a long-term undertaking. So that 2040 vision is 20 years away. And does speak to a transformed relationship to water and using stormwater as a resource. In the medium term, this water resilient objective is really our focus. Directly responding to the drought, ensuring that we have a build program and an efficiency program that can avoid day zero, that can avoid a future drought should that happen in the next in the foreseeable future. And over the next 3 years, what we currently embarked on over the last year and for another 2 is building the capacity within the department, within the city, to deliver on that strategy. Next slide. This is an institutional mission, which is particularly relevant to this meeting because it's how this came about. We have identified the leading utilities of the world, which Howard, the chair of this meeting, actually chairs, as the gold standard of water utility performance and innovation. And we've noted that their membership is purely in the north, richer countries in the US and in Europe and a few in Australia and Singapore. We want to become the first African city to be a leading water provider of the world, and in doing so provide safe access to quality water and sanitation services, ensure water resilience, and create a shared water future for all. So that's our specific institutional mission, and we want to join, be the first city in Africa to reach that particular claim. Next slide. We aspire to being rooted in our context, meaning this is an African utility. This is different to those others, and we want to reflect our heritage and our context and the issues that we face here. It's about putting the customer first, as the water quality crisis has shown us. It's being open to learning, but it's also benchmarking ourselves against best in the class. And that's why we've put the LUOW aspiration right up front in our actual aspiration. Setting strategic goals and measuring progress, putting in effective management. We've put in new 4 directors into place, and we've restructured the whole department. Making progress through continuous improvement. We're using the lean methodology to look at our processes, our blue drop, green drop, and other water quality issues, and trying to be better at communicating, which we realized is key to building trust. Next slide. We've got 8 transversal programs to achieve that mission. 4 are externally focused, all around those 5 commitments. A program on social inclusion, which is focusing on informal settlements. One on wise use, which is looking at our reticulation system. One on water resilience, which is this big infrastructure program, and one on water quality. And then 4 internal programs, which are all around building that capability to deliver on the strategy. A customer trust program, a financial sustainability, a continuous improvement, and an HR employer of choice program. Next slide. This is the big build program. It's a complicated graph there, but essentially that's our demand over the last 15 years and projecting into the future. That dot in the middle is where we've gotten to now, building our demand back from the drought. That light blue is the 300 megaliter a day committed infrastructure for groundwater reuse and desalinated water. And that gray above it is the future uncommitted at the moment infrastructure in order to meet our future demand. At the heart of it is 300 megaliters a day by 2028. Next slide. We're making good progress. We do have a 10 megaliter a day direct potable reuse scheme to pilot reuse. We have a 14 megaliter a day desal plant to pilot desal. We are doing a lot on clearing of illegal alien vegetation. We've done a lot of work on groundwater. We've exploited 3 big aquifers. We've already got 40 megaliters a day of additional groundwater. On the bottom right is our mayor commissioning one of our plants, and our top right is my political report, the Mayoral Committee for Water and Waste at our groundwater scheme. Next slide. The Water Quality Improvement Program was launched in April 2020, and we're doing a lot of work in that area, cleaning up rivers, improving our stormwater, but also an 11 billion Rand investment into wastewater treatment upgrades. Next slide. We are turning around our 23 wastewater treatment works. This is a large wastewater treatment works in the north of the city, Potsdam, which has been very much in the news and was underperforming for a number of years. It's a busy slide there, but essentially that's the effluent water quality from a year ago, January 2020, on the left to June, and then from July until January 2021. The red show effluent that didn't meet our license condition, and then the green is meeting the license condition. You can see COD, the rest of the world uses BOD, but essentially the same. E. coli and various other quality parameters, and massive improvements through operational improvements of our belt presses and other operational improvements. Next slide. We are making progress in the river quality, but it's a long-term agenda. We said that really this is a 20-year cleanup. It took other parts of the world 50 to 70 years. I worked on the Danube Black Sea. That's a 50, 70-year program. And we are preparing our citizens and our politicians to know that this is the long haul. Next slide. Let's go to the next slide. I can see we're taking a little bit of time. Next slide. Yeah, so on commitment 1, which is the informal settlements, doing a lot of work talking to these 500 informal settlements about developing better community-based approaches. How do we improve the lived experience of these informal settlement citizens? Next slide. Under COVID, they were particularly hard hit, and we had a specific COVID informal settlement plan about maintaining and enhancing our existing services, those communal standpipes and shared toilets. How do we make sure that because of our own absenteeism and our own resources, they are maintained, but also expanding those services to an additional 14,000 households that weren't properly served. and ensuring that the budget and the resources and the project management were in place for that. And then thirdly, health and hygiene promotion to make sure that basic public health was taken care of, that hand washing, sanitizing, social distancing, all of the key COVID public health issues were promoted. Next slide. Significant impact on staff. I won't go through all of these details in the interest of time, but because we're a big department, we had a lot of cases. We had 8 fatalities, unfortunately. A lot of depots that got closed where infected people affected the whole depot. Big impact on our revenues. Our meter reading went right down and our collection rates went down. Fortunately, they are coming up again now. And big increase in absenteeism because of various health-related issues, particularly a lot of staff with comorbidities who weren't able to do the kind of frontline work that they've been doing in the past. Next slide. This was a very successful program over the last few years. This is the collection rate, the amount of our bills that we actively collect, and you can see that it was deteriorating from 2015 to 2019. We had a big effort on more meter reading, on better debt collection, and of metering that pushed that right up to over 100%. It is a rolling average, but again, that's come down after COVID. Next slide. Okay, this is the wrapping up slide. This is my last slide. Essentially, just reinforcing the messages. The idea was really, how do we take these crises, this thought of never let a good crisis go to waste, to build back better? How did we actually use day zero, water quality and COVID to build resilience in the system, which is needed for future crises and to provide a better service? Day zero really showed us this over-reliance on single source rainwater, and this is all about diversifying our water sources. The water quality shock showed us that we needed to spend more time and effort and energy and investment on improving water quality and on focusing on our customers and how to work with them. And now COVID is showing us that informal settlements really are a major vulnerability and need special treatment, but also that our services are challenged on revenue with our demand going right down in the drought to half of what we had before, and our revenues are based on volumetric pricing. This had a major revenue crunch on the department, but also on staff and staff renewal. Our staff are tired and need a lot of encouragement. So the key lesson that we are learning, and we're not there yet, but we're very much trying to promote this within our department, is how do we build trust at the political level and with our customers and with our citizens. We're doing that through establishing clear priorities as we have in the strategy and in those commitments and those programs. Building the capacity, we have those 4 new directors and additional technical capacity. Translating these commitments into action, and that's what we are focused on at the moment. And also improving transparency, asking people to judge us on what we do and not what they perceive, and our communications on exactly what we're doing and what our limitations are. Next slide. Thank you. And I think if I look out the window, that's pretty close to where we are now, around 7:30 in the evening in Cape Town. Back to you, Howard.
Well, thank you so much, Michael. Just that, I'm flabbergasted. I've seen your presentation before, and every time I see it, I see new things in it, and I realize, like, my gosh, it's incredible you have time to even be here with us. So thank you so much for your presentation and taking the time out of what you obviously need to do, because you have a very large set of issues in front of you, and you've given yourself a pretty short timeline to get there. And I guess my first question is really about the capital, and as a former water utility manager, I picked up right on the your CapEx program, $180 million a year for capital. Is that going to be sufficient, or are you going to be needing more money? And since you've have long experience at the World Bank, are you looking for money outside of South Africa?
Yeah, thanks, Howard. So I'm not going to be able to convert everything into US, into rands, into dollars quick enough. But so the exchange rate at the moment is about 16 South African rands to US dollars. We've got a 10-year capital program, and I think a lot of my focus has been on stabilizing that 10-year program, because I've found that when I look at past trends, the pipeline for longer infrastructure projects is so long, and because of various procurement and other issues that can easily get derailed, we need to have a robust 10-year program in order to smooth our tariffs to finance them. And if we look at that, we've got a program of $40 billion over the next, 40 billion rand over the next 10 years, which is what, for about $2.5 billion. A third of that is in bulk water, which is around these big desal reuse groundwater investments, as well as bulk water augmentation, pipelines, treatment plants, and the like. Quarter of that is in wastewater treatment upgrades, which are particularly pricey, but all of those are constraining development in their particular areas, and because of this water quality agenda are needed. And about a fifth are in reticulation. The 20,000 kilometers of pipe, about 10,000 water and 10,000 sewer are old and needing a lot of work and a lot of upgrading. So 85% of that is in those three areas, and a big metering program. We're looking at AMI over the next period. Had you asked me that question a year ago, I would have said we can fund most of this through our own tariff resources. The city is actually quite strong, has a strong balance sheet, and can do that. With COVID and with our revenue projections, that's no longer the case. So it's likely that, particularly on something like desal, where you can get more effective off-budget financing, we're going to be looking at other investors, possibly even for the big reuse plant. There is also a question for both of those. By putting the operations under some kind of a PPP, we can assure a level of quality that is less possible than doing it in-house. So there might be other operational reasons to look at other financing vehicles.
Great. And just a comment to the audience, because you gave the numbers in liters per capita per day of how much water is being used per person, and the number that you have translates to about 39 gallons per person per day for water, which is among the lowest in the world right now. It's San Francisco came close a few years ago when they had their drought, and I believe Berlin is maybe a little bit lower. But that's a tremendous improvement in how low consumption can get. And do you have any plans on how you're going to be able to maintain that?
Yeah, I mean, this is at the key of the water utility conundrum, I think, is driving our demand down. Sorry. Because we are a water scarce area, and as we saw in the drought, we need to do that for efficiency use, but also getting the revenues, which are based on volume, and getting that balance right is tricky. We've learned, so the drought was just survival, and it was get it down as low as possible in order to get through the summer. We have a winter rainfall, but we've also learned from Singapore. They have a specific per capita target of around 130 liters per capita gross. Okay. And ours has been sort of bouncing around, and we are going to take the same kind of approach. We actually want to target a specific sweet spot and ensure that our tariffing can provide us enough revenue based on that, and using those same measures as we used in the drought, the physical demand management, as well as the pricing, as well as the communications to keep that that level. So, we've also seen the bounce back hasn't been immediate. We've seen in other parts of the world, in Sao Paulo and in Australia, it takes 3-4 years to kind of get back to your original demand. We actually wanted to keep that deliberately lower because we really can't afford to get into that same precarious position.
Very good. I'm gonna change the line of questioning because the water geeks, you and me, can talk about this the details a lot and really enjoy that. But just to make sure everyone is interested in your answer to this question, the wine industry is important to your economy, and the question is, how were they affected, and how did the owners of the vineyards respond to this?
Yeah, so this was complicated in the middle of the drought. I came at the end of it and didn't get all of that pressure, but essentially our regional scheme, it's called the Western Cape Water Supply System, and that system is the 3 nationally owned dams and the 3 City of Cape Town dams and our joint infrastructure, predominantly our pipelines and our treatment plants. But that water, in round numbers, City of Cape Town draws about 60% of the total volume, neighboring towns around 10%, and the balance 30% goes to agriculture. And that agriculture is 90% of that is pretty high-end viticulture. So those grape farmers that have wine for export and are pretty successful at it, the Napa Valley of South Africa, they actually are pretty efficient at their water use. So, had this been flood irrigation or something like that, we would have said just cut that right back. But they have a finely tuned operation, and their vineyards can take less water for a certain amount of time, and then their vineyards die. And those are big investments. This is 100,000 jobs for the region. It is the biggest employer in the region, as well as a significant source of revenue. It's actually bigger than tourism. So agriculture is a big player politically and socially and all of those things. So they did take a hit, and the restrictions that were put in place required a 60% reduction in agriculture and a 45% reduction for municipal domestic supply, because the municipality was prejudiced. But they did take a hit, not just the wine farmers, but also a lot of fruit farmers. We've got a lot of high-end fruit also for export, and some of those vineyards did die. There's a silver lining to it, though. They're actually in the heart of the drought was a very collegial relationship between some of those farmer organizations, the big irrigation companies, and the city, and because their demand is seasonal. They need their water from beginning of November until February, March, and they don't need it after that. Mm. So our drought was persisting February, March, April, and they actually had a massive transfer of water into our dams of their own allocation. And we followed suit a year later of giving up more of our water that was needed over the summer months, because our dams are refilling and our demand was low, and gave them actually more than their allocation. But a big focus is on the hydro economics of that system, and how do we relook at all of those legal abstraction agreements and revisit them. We've also got a lot of deterioration in the catchments because of the proliferation of invasive alien plants, pines and eucalyptus. So a big program to cut down exotic plants, because that is still our cheapest source of water.
Thank you for that answer. The next question is really about what happened in Cape Town with day zero and the incredible water stress that you had. And that seems to be something that maybe this was the worst in the world in modern times of coming close to no water. What recommendations do you have for other cities? Not Philadelphia, everyone. Philadelphia's going to be okay, but other cities. What recommendations or thoughts do you have for them so that they don't have to face these problems, or what happens if they do?
Yeah, I was looking at a couple of news articles. I saw one yesterday, said global population hit by extreme drought set to double, in the next 20 years or so. And there was another one, Istanbul, Turkey drought, Istanbul could run out of water in 45 days. I think part of the reason it became such international news in Cape Town is actually this has been an issue for a long time, but it's water folk like us that have been kind of shouting in the wilderness, and it didn't really hit the politicians or the public in this real way. And I think part of what was effective about Cape Town was getting out this message of day zero, and that was a sort of a branding issue. It's quite controversial in the city because it was a scare tactic that worked, too well in a way, chased away a lot of tourists. It made a lot of political and institutional churn around a crisis, but it was effective at galvanizing action. And I think, the most exciting action for me was that it really was an all of city approach. So, the water department did what the water department does, put in meters, fixed leaks, put up our tariffs, those kind of things. But you actually found everyone coming to the table. Households would pride themselves on, the less water they could use, the cooler they were. People wouldn't flush the toilet, they wouldn't wash their hair in a week. Businesses got in on it. And so meters for 30-second showers. The hotels removed the taps from the bath and put in their own desal plants and their own reuse plants and their own groundwater plants. So that for me was the exciting thing. This was really a way of saying water is not just the water department's business, but it's actually all of our business. And climate change and this particular crisis has shown us that. How do we take that lesson to look at water quality? Because water quality is exactly the same. A lot of rubbish being put in the sewers, blocking up the sewers, sewer spills, fats, oils, and grease from restaurants. So there's this interrelatedness which Day Zero really showed us and galvanized in a way that people could really get behind. And I suppose the lesson is that climate change isn't necessarily this abstract phenomenon over there. The 2-degree or 4-degree world in 2050 or 2100. If you're reliant on rainwater like we have been, and like Perth has seen, you might run out of water, next year. And what is your plans, and how much storage have you got?
It's just last week, I believe, that the federal government here in the U.S. has recognized that climate change is a big issue here, and is agreeing with you, and hopefully will be joining with South Africa and other countries to deal more straightforwardly with the climate change. I'll give you a really easy question that came in here. Is the Cape Town water utility under your direct management?
Yes. So utility is it's a department of the municipality. So the way we are governed, we've got a political system, a mayor and a mayoral committee and councillors, and then the administrative system is a city manager, and there's 11 executive directors. So I'm the executive director responsible for water and sanitation and for solid waste management. So I'm the accounting officer of the budget, and in charge of the HR and in charge of the deliverables from that department.
Great. How are you balancing informal settlement sanitation access with wastewater treatment plant upgrades?
Yeah, I mean, these are night and day. You know, it's an area where the engineers in the wastewater branch are very happy doing the upgrades because it's big capital programs and big budgets and things that they can control and are very used to. Informal settlements is a very different kind of a challenge, and we find that the key there is not finance, but actually getting a skill set that can work with communities in the way that they are prepared to work with us. You know, it's a politically active space. South Africa's got a terrible past. We have one of the highest inequalities in the world, and Cape Town is the extreme of that. And it's very visible. When you land at Cape Town International Airport, you are surrounded by shacks, and you look at the mountain, and the rich are, you know, around the mountain with very different lifestyles. So there's a charged environment. Communities have also been given the impression that they will all be given free housing. And there is a big housing program which has delivered a lot of houses over time, but a lot of people in those informal settlements don't qualify for those houses. So you've got a disconnect between the housing grants and the housing program and people's lived reality. So you're coming into a complex space.
Yes.
And what our vision is, and we've had some success in it so far, is engaging with NGOs, engaging with people who understand that work better, saying we will bring, you know, a piece of the puzzle. We'll bring some of the engineering, some of the resources, but you also need to meet us, you know, in the same place so we can agree what kind of solutions are appropriate to this particular settlement. If you come and people think it's all about waterborne sewage, whereas there's actually, you know, more innovative, affordable solutions for that particular community. But a lot of that is about engagement, about communication, about meeting people where they are.
You know, a large part of my work has always been about how do you meet halfway with the issues of water and wastewater and green infrastructure and the mayor's interests, which lean more towards transportation, housing, poverty, jobs, education, policing. And to me, there's always like this magic, this place where we can all meet and all support each other and create integrated programs that really make a difference in the lives of more disadvantaged people in our communities. Is that something that is happening or successful or on the books?
Yeah, look, I think it wasn't the question you asked, but just to pick up on political priorities and where water normally falls, this was one of the big advantages of day zero. This was number one in the mayor's agenda for, you know, a year, and had meetings every morning with the water department. So we've still got that access, if you like. But the complicated work of working with multiple departments, of working with non-city actors, of working with different tiers of government, and of actually getting politicians on sides to all sing from the same song sheet is not easy. And I think our commitment one, which is really the informal settlement access issue, is probably our most important and probably the one that we currently least equipped to do and want to learn most from others on.
Great. I have a question from a colleague of mine who does surveys every year of who drinks bottled water and who drinks tap water in Philadelphia. And she asks if you know the proportion of Cape Town residents that drink the municipal water as opposed to bottled water.
I don't have that figure, but I can say something that is probably one of our biggest challenges. Because of the drought and a lot of information around that and some misinformation and a lot of noise, a lot of people shifted into bottled water and started to distrust the quality of the water coming out of the tap. We have excellent drinking water quality. You look at our scientific services, 99.9% of our samples, meet all the requirements. But at the moment, our customer base, well, from a year ago, 50% of them didn't trust the quality coming out of the tap.
Mm-hmm.
And our challenge there is actually not the bottled water one, but it's our reuse program. We are going to be introducing direct potable reuse. And if we have that trust deficit by our customers, there's a vulnerability there. So we are pushing where we can, taking people to our treatment plants, taking them to our scientific services, doing all the promotion we can to build that up and regain customers' trust in this in the water. I don't think we have a big, and I worked in South Asia and places like that, and we're not at that level. I think bottled water is still a relatively small percentage.
A similar question comes from somebody. Sounds like they have been to Cape Town or from Cape Town, because they talk about Mayor Plato. Is that your mayor? And the question is whether Mayor Plato will drink first glass of water from your direct reuse plant. And I think that's I don't know the politics there, so I think that's a little bit of just a dig.
It's a great question, and he said he will. And we will be going. The city manager already has, and I have, and my political mayoral committee member has, and Mayor Plato will be next on the list.
Okay, very good.
In fact, we want it in the city. All of our meetings need to be our reuse water in our own bottling.
Great. Okay, good for you. Question about aquatic life and wildlife, and they're also impacted obviously by drought, long-term drought. Are they considered at all in the strategy that you're developing?
Yeah, I mean, the environment is a key part of the tourist offering as well. We've got Table Mountain, we've got these great beaches, and we've got 21 river systems that are part of the offering. So we see the environment as not just a nice to have, but a key economic player in this. So our water sensitive city commitment is all about the environment and all about including aquatic life and fauna and flora and the like.
Okay, well, we'll do one more question. I'm looking for that. Quite what that question will be. Well, let me take a look. Emergency strategies. I mean, so. Like any good crisis, Cape Town went into this emergency a few years ago and got things done. Is there any part of your current strategy looking forward to develop an emergency plan in case something like this happens again?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of things in that space that can be helpful and a lot that are not helpful because I think the key thing that happened is that the control of all the key decisions was removed from the water department to the political space and to another, part of government. By the time I got involved in the middle of 2018, that had wrestled back, and now we sort of consolidating that. But part of the disaster risk management side was also there, and it meant that you got people with a range of solutions, tugging in icebergs and bringing in the military to control water points and things that were just a little too dramatic, if you like, for the actual conditions that we were in. So this theme of resilience and of how do we have the resilience in the system from a management side and a capacity side to be able to respond to shocks, to be able to respond to disasters ahead of time and communicate them effectively to the politicians is really at the heart of the strategy. So it's really saying, we've got this, guys, and it's been tested in the drought. We're responding to the water quality issues and we're responding to COVID. Look at our record and trust us in the next shock that we can do that. So, the whole language around disaster risk management, it does bring a useful thing, but if it's externalized, it can actually, potentially, disrupt in a way that's not always that helpful.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. You have a lot on your shoulders there, and you know that the leading utilities of the world and the University of Pennsylvania and all of Philadelphia are with you, and anything we can do to help you, we're there for you. And thank you for participating today. It was a great session, and lots of questions we didn't get to. And we will get to those. We'll put those in writing and get those questions out on social media. And to the audience, thank you for participating. Remember, the program was recorded and will be available on the website tomorrow. And please take a few minutes to fill out the survey that you'll receive via the email. It really helps us understand how the programming was and how to do things better next time. In addition, if you have ideas for topics or speakers, please also let us know via the survey. And so just thank you everyone for the great discussion today. And thank you, Mike. And so nice. I mean, the nice thing about COVID is that suddenly we can have these kinds of halfway around the world conversations, and it seemed like we're all in the same place. So be healthy and stay well, and keep us informed on what's going on.
Well, thanks very much, Howard. I really appreciate the opportunity, and thanks to the Water Center and to the Leading Utilities of the World group, and to all the participants. I'll put my email at the end of the presentation there, so I hope that gets sent around. Feel free to send any follow-up questions, and I'll respond to them. Thanks for the offer of support, and great to be with you.
Great to be with you.